Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm calling this meeting to order at 10:02 a.m. of the Cape Cod Public Procurement Officials Association. Today is March 28th, 2023. I've been saying the 27th all day, which is interesting. I guess I'm a day behind. Um, so today we're going to start with first order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes, which was sent around last week for the January 24th, 2023 meeting. I will entertain a motion at this time from my members. Everyone is muted, so you might have to unmute or you can utilize the chat to make a motion. Anyone?
Jan
Oh.
Michaela here, I move.
Thanks, Michaela. Do I have a second?
Hi, it's Carol and I second.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. All right. All those in favor, you can raise your hand or say aye in the chat. If there were any changes.
Aye.
Okay. I don't hear anyone in opposition. Thank you, everyone. All right. So I do want to go ahead and start our presentations right away. So let's start first with the MHAC update. I believe I did see Janet on the call. There she is.
I am here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I put a presentation together. I'm going to whip through it because it's like a few slides that I will try to get through as quickly as I can.
No problem.
And I'm so good at these sharing screens that it's humiliating. Are you seeing my screen yet?
Not yet.
No. Okay, great. Oh, man. You know what? Because I have two screens, it's going to drive me. You know what? I won't show you. It's basically, I'm just going to whip through these anyway. So,
okay, no problem.
Let's see. So I wanted to give you a few contract updates, some addenda to some of our contracts, an invitation once again to iBuy, to little talk about First Monday, and then some of our upcoming events. So starting with F19, leasing and financing, we've added 3 new suppliers totaling 5. Some of our suppliers that are leasing can help manage life cycle for technology investments. So you can, Insight Investments is a new one. They identified 6 phases of the life cycle of a leased computer. So you can go to them and they can help you with that type of thing. We still have HP Ontario Investments as a small business in case you need a small business to work with. And also just consider large ticket items on our leasing contracts. You can, if you're buying, it's not only for technology, you're buying fleets or trucks or buses or earth moving equipment or anything like that. You can use our contracts to lease. There are low minimum fees and low leasing thresholds. Our G17 custodial and cleaning equipment and supplies contract was redone. We have a lot of reliable custodial suppliers that can keep your prices affordable. Small businesses, we added Kelco Products, Butler Dearden, which is a division of Imperial Day, Clean Cut Solutions, that's easy for me to say, Clean Green Solutions, Emerald Green Building Services. So a lot of different technology janitorial companies that use technology. Filter Sales and Service, some of the same old is still on there. We've added some diverse suppliers, including custodial cleaning equipment. CNC Janitorial Supplies is woman and minority owned. Millhench Supply is a small women-owned business, and there are 30 other suppliers on contracts that you can look at. We've added a new category, which is the UV disinfectant lighting, which seems to be very popular, not just in hospitals, but in schools and everywhere else now. So that's something all of these vendors have make it available. Austin Supply, CNC Janitorial, Clean Green Solutions, and what the people that I just named, the companies I just named. There are built-in systems through American Ultraviolet. There's fixed mount systems, there's disinfected lighting through Puro UV, and Pyure and Moonbeam are industrial strength purifiers, if you need those. Some contract addenda, DO5, our life science and research. I'm not sure how much the municipalities use these life science and research contracts, but if you have schools that are using them, they might be useful to you. Carolina Biological is a contract that increased their shipping threshold, so now anything under 250 gets a charge, unfortunately. Sigma Aldrich, if you're buying chemicals, is no longer on contract. There's going to be a price increase with Nikon, surprise, and then Airmaster is no longer on a contract. On our F14 network infrastructure and management services, as of February 3rd, 2023, CenturyLink has power allocation for co-location services. If you ask me what that is, I'm going to have to go back and find out. Flooring contracts, Shaw Industry has provided an updated dealer list. So our contracts with carpet and with furniture, you can either go direct or go to a dealer. So that's helpful. We're extending our moving and relocation services through November 30th. William B. Meyer has been suspended from contract, and ABC and Moving and Storage has updated their pricing. One more, let's see. Custodial cleaning supplies. Millhench has updated their pricing, and we've added. We're starting to add more suppliers to Northern New England. Not that you guys have to care about that, but we've added Swish River, which can help sometimes to come down if you want them to come down the Cape. Maybe somebody's willing to do that. So we had recently we had a supplier meeting out at the College of the Holy Cross, and we provided some supplier awards because we appreciate them. So Diversity Supplier of the Year was Welcome Scientific. They're small women-owned business, disadvantaged women business. They distribute scientific supplies and chemicals. A Diversity Supplier of the Year, another one was Dual Award, was Silver Screen Design, another woman-owned business for promotional products, banners, etc. Our new Supplier of the Year is Smith Systems. They're on CO7 for tables, chairs, screens. They're a great company to work with. You can usually work through them through a Steelcase dealer. The new Supplier of the Year is on a value-added resources reseller contract that we collaborated with UMass on. That's WEIIT Solutions. I know I'm going fast on F22. And our outstanding partner of the year is Connection. They're on several contracts. They're on B11, FO4, FO5, and F22. So they're one of the big VAR contracts too that UMass chose. Okay, iBuy Marketplace. Just to remind you, it's out there. We're actually doing a lot with it. There are 3 ways to purchase. You know, you can go direct to a supplier, you can go through our iBuy Marketplace, and you can do an RFQ through this platform. That's I seem to think is one of the most popular features of this platform, because you can go through vetted suppliers and get your quotes, and it's really pretty simple to use. It's streamlined requests. You can pay by PO or credit card. You can have a checkout, single cart checkout. You can have administrative control. So say you want people, your school department wants to go shopping, and they, you know, you want to give them somebody permission to pull the trigger to buy. That's a bad use to actually purchase. You can have set up administrative controls to do that. You can search for diverse suppliers, and you can do product comparisons. So it's a neat little tool. It's free to use. It gives you another tool in your tool bag. We provide training every other Wednesday at 1 o'clock. We will also do in-person training live in your office, or we'll do them webinars for you. You can invite as many people as you'd like when you want to do that. That's it on iBuy. I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here. First Monday is our new publication. If you haven't got that, please just email me and I'll make sure that you get this thing, because this thing is chock full of information, and our team works really hard to provide updated information on it. And we're trying not to bombard you with a million emails like we used to. So this is a publication that will come out the first Monday of each month, no matter if it's a holiday or not, 10 o'clock. It's got all the contract updates, the addenda, some great articles. And of course, if you haven't seen it, the best feature is Where's Janet? Shows. I've done 3 trade shows in a week, so that's where you'll find me. I'm on the road a lot, which I'm loving. So if I always say, if you want me to come to your town and city, I'm happy to do that. And I live on the Cape, so on the summer, I'm hoping to jump over to see some of your people live in person. So let me know if I can come see you. Upcoming events. If you golf, our golf event is free to our customers and free to our suppliers, but there's limited people allowed to be there. It's June 2nd at the country club, the Blackstone Country Club, which is a little bit of a distance, but if you're a golfer, it's a fun day to kind of network. And we have chosen our expo date, which is that is September 21st. That's going to be at the DCU again. The theme, my theme got voted down, and I'm really mad because it's September 21st. I wanted Earth, Wind, and Fire. I wanted the theme to be Earth, Wind, and Fire. It is not. It is going to be Fall in New England, which I think will be very fun too. We go kind of all out with the festivities, so hopefully you can make it. I want to thank you for your time, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Janet. I really appreciate a great update. All right. Next we have OSD update. I believe I saw Trish on the call.
I'm here, Jen. Thank
You're
you.
here. Great.
Yes, good
Awesome.
morning, everybody. Just a few updates from OSD. First of all, we are, with regard to our public safety PSEO1 contract, category 3, we now offer greater access to body cameras and other police equipment. Several new vendors have been added with additional categories. So it's really a contract to take a look at for our public safety communities or whatever, police departments, etc. For complete contract details, as always, please refer to the contract user guide. Additionally, we have several new contractors awarded under VEH 110. That is our light and medium duty truck contract with many categories, which includes those 2 categories, as well as cargo vans, police pursuit vehicles, special service vehicles. Once again, you want to refer to the contract user guide, which will reflect these changes in additional categories and vendor offerings. With the spring rapidly approaching, let's hope you would know it by today's weather. Just wanted to take a few minutes to highlight 4 contracts which may be of interest to you. The first is FAC 103. That's our traditional landscaping and groundskeeping services contract, which include category service offerings for tree care and irrigation services. FAC 104, this is traditionally, we always call it the playground contract, but it truly includes probably everything, not just the playground, but everything around it. So that would include nursery products, fertilizer, mulch, and of course the equipment, site furnishing, splash pads, you name it, fitness equipment, fencing, and more. So FAC 104 is a very popular contract this time of year. FAC 116, that would be the lawnmower, tractor, utility trailers, golf carts, and as well as battery-powered lawn equipment. And finally, under FAC 104, this is a contract that is in the process of transitioning over to a new contract, which will become effective on October 1st. That will be FAC 124. This is our stalwart building repair and maintenance contract, and it originally was set to expire March 31st. We have extended that through September 30th. So you may continue to purchase under FAC 100 through September, with the new contract expected to launch on October 1st. We are working with all current FAC 100 contract vendors to complete the extension documentation and sign off on everything. So if you have any questions regarding this particular contract, I refer you to the contract manager, Sean Corbin. And all contact information for these seasonally appropriate contracts, as well as all OSD contracts, may be located on page 1 of all of the user guides. With regard to upcoming events, the local government team, of which I am a part of, we're going to be, I feel like we'll be running into Janet on the road, as she said she's traveling a lot, but we've got 2 events coming up near term. We have the NARO conference, which is occurring up in Waltham on April 3rd. This is a meeting for the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, as well as the MCOPA conference, and I probably mispronounced that, but that's the Mass Chief of Police annual trade show, which will be held April 12th in Marlborough. So if you or any of your department heads will be joining those conferences, please stop by the OSD booth, and we'd love to see you there. Again, in the spirit of spring of 23, Earth Week is rapidly approaching, which is the week of April 16 through 22. And this time is obviously we set aside to celebrate the beauty of our planet. Our marketing person is the best. I'm reading from some flowery language here, so please bear with me. But it truly is a time for each one of us to celebrate the planet and our commitment to protecting it. And with this in mind, we encourage you to investigate and embrace any and all opportunities in your communities to purchase environmentally preferable products, or EPP, which I'm sure you're already doing. But here again, just to highlight, bring to your attention, some ways to help reduce your carbon footprint may include considering, if you're not doing so already, LED efficient lighting, battery powered landscaping equipment, remanufactured toner cartridges, environmentally preferable cleaning products, and electric and or hybrid vehicles. If any of these are of interest to you, please reach out to me. We have contracts that support all of these particular products mentioned. OSD does publish the Environmentally Preferable Products and Services Guide, which is located at mass.gov/EPP. And finally, with regard to highlighting the work that you're doing in your community, OSD does publish our bi-monthly magazine called By the Way. So if you are engaged in a particular project, or have a story to share with us where you'd like your community highlighted, maybe the ways in which OSD has supported your efforts, we would love to take a few minutes to interview you and promote the good work that's being done all across the Cape. So with that in mind, thank you, Jen, for the time to give the update. Have a great meeting, friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Next up, we have our main event, our presentation by Maya French from the Office of the Inspector General. She's going to be doing a presentation today on real property. I'm really excited about this topic. It was one that our members did want to see, so happy to bring her on board today. All right. And
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Jennifer.
no problem.
I have about a 45-minute presentation related to real property. So I think my slides are up. Can you see them okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go from the beginning.
Great.
Let's see. So happy to be here and thank you for the invitation. My name is Maya French. I am the Deputy Director of the Regulatory and Compliance Division with the Office of the Inspector General. And I'm here today to talk to you about real property transactions under the Uniform Procurement Act, which is also known as Chapter 30B. The purpose of Chapter 30B is to promote open and fair competition for the acquisition or disposition of real property. That's what we're talking about today, but you also heard earlier about different contracts that are available to you for supplies and services. Specifically with OSD, they are the state procurement agent, and local jurisdictions can ride the coattails of those contracts to ensure that they're getting quality and best value supplies from the OSD contract, as well as services. And it's really designed to undo favoritism and promote an equal opportunity for all qualified vendors to participate in public contracts. Here today, I'm focusing exclusively on selling or purchasing property by a local jurisdiction, selling property from a local jurisdiction or a local jurisdiction that's acquiring property. And again, the purpose of Chapter 30B is to prevent favoritism, or in the case of real estate sweetheart deals, I think, which we've all heard of. With regard to real property transactions specifically, it includes land and buildings, structures or property affixed to land and to buildings. There are a variety of interests in real property. In the law, I happen to also be a lawyer. They are labeled as different things based off of their use. There's fee simple ownership, with which many people are familiar with. That's ownership and complete possession, complete control of that property. Lease and rental agreements, options to purchase, which are typically known as future interests, easements, which is a very specific narrow use. Often people are familiar with utility easements, mortgages, which is a financial interest that attaches to a property, preservation agreements, profits apprendi, which is harvesting something of value from the land, mineral, or soil, something like that, and riparian rights, which are water rights. So on the Cape, that is something that would be at play, riparian rights. There are many, many different kinds of transactions in the real property zone. We're exclusively talking about Chapter 30B. And we feel like, as I've read the law, looked at the statute, and looked at Section 16 of Chapter 30B, it became clear to me that it was sort of added on after many other statutes in Massachusetts that govern the use of real property, because real property achieves a lot of public policy objectives, whether it be a public school, a public park, a public beach, a public parking lot. They're achieving different public policy objectives that reflect the values of your community. There are many transactions that actually fall outside of Chapter 30B, and they are governed by other statutes, including things like the rental of units to tenants by housing or redevelopment authorities. Certainly public economic development or urban renewal. Those are other statutes that govern the use of real property and how that real property becomes available for development. There's also eminent domain takings, which is a governmental taking of real property, usually not consensually, and that is governed by a different statute. The redemption or auction of tax title property, again, that's a different statute. That's if somebody has failed to pay their taxes, the government can come in and take their property. And then licenses or permits, which are a very limited use of real property, that is not in Chapter 30B. So those are things that are outside of Chapter 30B. All statutes, all laws that have been codified and promulgated by our legislature have the big bright line rules. Then they have the definitions within the statute, and then they have what are known as sort of exemptions, which I just reviewed, and then exceptions to the law, which I'll talk about a little bit sort of at the end of this presentation. There are always exceptions to the rules, including things like emergencies. An emergency is always an exception to the standard rule, and how you operate in the context of an emergency is often embedded within the statute. So we'll look at that. Let's talk about when Chapter 30B is invoked. So if the real property transaction that you are engaged in is subject to Chapter 30B, you're examining it based off of thresholds. Specifically, if the cost to acquire the property is more than $35,000, or the value of the disposed property is more than $35,000, then Chapter 30B is triggered. Typically, to achieve the open component, that goes to advertising. Now, real property is very different than supplies and services. So the actual description of the transaction is a little bit different. And the contract award is not necessarily based on price. It is based on many factors because it's real property and it's very different. There is flexibility within section 16 of chapter 30B, just that section itself. You can structure it like a bid, or you can structure it like what is known as a proposal in section 6 of chapter 30B. If you are securing specialized services and price does not dictate the contract award or the outcome, you develop a different rubric for assessing the offers that are received from vendors. You can structure, and oftentimes real property transactions are structured as proposals. You have your own rating system based off of the needs of your community. Let's look at the acquisition of real property first, specifically. So if you are seeking something, you are triggering Chapter 30B if the cost of that property is more than $35,000. We'll look at what that advertising is. If the cost is less than $35,000, under Chapter 30B, you are not required to advertise. I just want to make note that even if state law doesn't require you to do something, you might have local rules and bylaws that do. So if it is not under section 16 of chapter 30B and your local jurisdiction is acquiring additional property for something, you might have a local rule that requires notice on your website when you're soliciting offers from potential parties that could give you the property that you're looking for. So you might have local rules that require some notice or advertising, but if it's under $35,000, Chapter 30B is not at play. Now, remember, it's the cost of the acquisition, not the value of the property. If the acquisition costs more than $35,000, that's when you advertise. And if it's a lease agreement, if you're not buying that property outright, or if it's an easement for use, it's the entire term of the contract that is factored in. And that's the same across 30B and all of its different sections. It is the entire term of the contract. It is not just a single year. So oftentimes the advertising component is triggered, even if it's an easement, even if it's a small piece of land that is being used for a particular purpose. So remember, when you're acquiring property, determining what you actually need for that acquisition is not the same as having already identified a parcel that you want. So the purpose of Chapter 30B is to uncover different opportunities that may be available to you when you are seeking to acquire additional property, depending on what you need it for. If it's for public parking, that you're uncovering different opportunities related to public parking. So I'm imagining let's public parking for a beach. If the local jurisdiction was going to provide that parking for its residents, does it need to be within a abutting property, or could it be within a couple of blocks of the beach? So you want to avoid overly restrictive descriptions that result in only one property meeting your governmental body's needs, so you can uncover lots of opportunities. Now, and that's what advertising does when you are under section 16 of chapter 30B. So when you're identifying your needs, think about the usage. Do you need open space? Think about the location. Does it need to be near public transportation? Is the space interior or exterior space? When do you need it? Is it seasonal? And do you want to purchase it outright or lease it? Do you just need it for a particular purpose for a couple of years, or are you going to need that property always? And of course, budget comes into play. Even if there is not a contract award requirement, the lowest offer received from a qualified party, everybody has a budget. So even if price isn't dictating the contract award, you're contemplating that in the context of your real property transaction. Let's look at the disposition of real property. If you are disposing of real property in the form of a lease or otherwise, Consider your current and future needs. How do you want to dispose of that property? Would it be for a short-term lease agreement? Do an inventory of the current property that your local jurisdiction owns. Survey the different department heads and invite public comment. So if you, again, I just put a note here, structure the lease term to make the property available for the future use. If that's part of your needs, you can maximize sort of revenue and the value of property with a short-term lease agreement, and then keep it for yourself for later use. Look at the type, amount, and location of that property that you're contemplating disposing. And then any reuse restrictions. So if that property can only be used for parking, or if that property, that building can only be used for educational purpose, that is incorporated into your disposition. And then examine the method of your disposition, oftentimes a lease or a sale or an easement, and the actual disposition date. The statute requires that you declare the property available for disposition. And what does declaration mean? Oftentimes that's in a public meeting, and that's reduced in the minutes that that property has been declared and is available for disposition. You want to specify any of the restrictions on the subsequent use of that property. And then you're always determining the property value. What the statute requires is that you determine the property value through procedures customarily accepted by the appraising profession. So it's not full employment for appraisers, but it is actually, I think, a best practice to hire an appraiser to determine the value of that property in its full its full commercial use, to maximize and to really understand what you could get for that property. If a property is sold below that appraised value, you need to post notice in the Central Register, which is a publication that's overseen by the Secretary of State's office. The notice must explain the decision to dispose of the property at below market value. So I live outside of a city. It's densely populated, and a local jurisdiction might dispose of public parking for green space. They're not going to get as much money necessarily for green space, and that would be something that would be noticed in the Central Register, and you would disclose the difference between the market value and the disposition price received from the prospective party. Let's look at developing proposals and what that entails. We're going to look at the major proposal components, which would include a description of the property or interest to be acquired or disposed of. This is in all proposals, whether you're acquiring or disposing of. You're identifying any evaluation criteria if you're structuring this like a classical proposal or something like Section 6 of Chapter 30B. If it's not based off of price, you are telling entities that may be interested in this transaction what you will do to evaluate their offers. You identify your proposal submission requirements, where and when those submissions must be received, and you identify all contract terms and conditions. Include the type, amount, and location requirements. This is listed in Section 16 as a requirement. Identify the property's intended use and identify the method of acquisition or disposition, and identify any planned occupancy date. So these are things that you need to include in your proposal. When you are looking at your evaluation criteria, make sure you're contemplating the responsiveness of the party that is providing the information and their responsibility. So in real property transactions, the responsibility determination goes to the financing capabilities of that particular party. Can they engage? Are they able to pay for, if it's an acquisition, that property? Any comparative criteria that you're using, the method for evaluating the prices. And again, remember, you can structure this based off of price, which would be your classical invitation for bid, or you can structure it just like an RFP under section 16, under section 6 in section 16, although it's not exactly the same thing. You do not need to use the identical rating system in section 6. You can come up with your own rating system. It could be numerical. It could be something other than what section 6 requires in chapter 30B. And if you're familiar with section 6 of chapter 30B, those rating systems are highly advantageous, not advantageous, or unacceptable. You don't need to use those labels. You can use something that is different. You solicit the information that you will use to select. We say successful proposer here, a successful party. So this is really up to you. Land transactions are very different. And the use of that land really reflects the values of your local community. You're always identifying the proposal submission requirements. And again, this is different than section 6 because they become public documents right away. That evaluation process is dynamic, but it still becomes public right away. So you identify with regard to the submissions, when and where proposals must be delivered, how the proposal packages should be marked, and if there's any corrections, modifications, or how a party withdraws a proposal. So it's a good idea, a best practice to list the required standard forms. And again, remember that there's no separate price submission required when you are operating under section 16 of chapter 30B, unlike section 6 of chapter 30B. So a lot of times that gets confused. I'm just making it clear. In a real property transaction, an additional form that is required is the disclosure of beneficial interest form. It is not listed in section 16 of chapter 30B. It's a requirement of DCAM. It's actually listed under a different statute. We'll look at that shortly. We're going to move to the contract terms and conditions. You want to include all those contract terms and conditions in your solicitation. And then we're going to the advertising requirement of proposals, whether you're disposing of or acquiring. The statute requires that you advertise in a local newspaper at least once a week for 2 consecutive weeks before the proposal opening day. Now, this is a little bit different than the other advertising requirements in Chapter 30B with regard to the frequency of advertising, because you're doing it once a week for 2 consecutive weeks before the proposal opening day. Now, the last ad must appear at least 8 calendar days before the proposal opening. We're going to take a look at what that means. Here's an example of an advertisement. If the real property transaction involves more than 2,500 square feet, which most do, at least you're going to have your newspaper advertisement, you're going to have your central register notice. So here we are at the $35,000 threshold. This is just a sample of a disposition in the form of a lease of space that is used for childcare in an existing structure. And it's giving you the information that's required in the statute. Now let's really look at those advertising requirements. So we have a proposal opening date of October 22nd. It needs to be advertised 8 days out, 8 calendar days out from that proposal opening. Now we say that calendar days include weekends. We do not interpret the advertising requirements. That's the Secretary of State's office. So here it's calendar days include weekends specifically for proposals operating under section 16 of chapter 30B. 8 days out from the 22nd is the 14th. And then it's twice before the proposal opening date. So the first published ad is on the 7th. Now let's look at the central register requirement. If it's submitted on the 12th, it takes place on the 18th. That's 30 days out from the actual required advertisement. Here we have it in linear format. You're counting back from the day that you're opening, and you're satisfying those advertising requirements, because we know if you don't satisfy requirements within Chapter 30B, there's no valid contract. It's a civil statute. It requires affirmative steps to achieve open, fair competition as enacted by our legislature and interpreted by our courts. The Inspector General's office is embedded in the statute. We are the enforcing agency, and we are providing these educational programs as ways to help you comply with the law and ensure that you're getting it right and following the statute so you have a valid contract. So here, the bid submission date is October 22nd. 8 days prior in the newspaper is the 14th. 1 week more, giving you 2 times, is October 7th. You have to advertise in the Central Register 30 days before the opening. So you have to make sure you know the submission doesn't mean it's published. So you're calling the Secretary of State's office, determining how long it takes to get published. Here we say the earliest publication is September 18th. Now remember, in that advertisement, you are including the geographical area of the property you intend to acquire or dispose of, the general terms and general requirements. The specifics are in the actual documents, the time and place for those proposal submissions. Now, all potential proposers or parties are treated equally. That's kind of the point of Chapter 30B, is to ensure that all qualified vendors have an equal opportunity to participate in public contracting. In this case, the contracting is related to the acquisition or disposition of real property. Now, keep a list with contact information for everyone who obtains a request for proposal for addenda. It's a best practice. You publicly open proposals, record the name and the descriptive information on the property and the price offered by each party. Then the evaluation of those proposals takes place, and it's in accordance with the criteria set forth in the proposal. So if it's price only, that's like a bid, or if it's more like Section 6, if it's truly you're sort of ranking and evaluating different criteria, and that's more like a proposal, then that's when you begin that process. And all offers are received only in one envelope. So ultimately, you're submitting the name of the selected party and the amount of the transaction to the Central Register, and then also the disclosure of any beneficial interests, if there are some, to the Division of Capital Asset Management. Now that there is an interested party, it needs to be disclosed. It doesn't necessarily mean that the transaction is undone. You next execute the contract, and you're retaining the records. The request for proposal and the addenda are included, as well as the advertisements and the notices. These are your procurement files. They are maintained, they are public records and available for review by a member of the public, the Globe, or your local newspaper. Your procurement file includes your evaluation materials, a copy of any disclosures of beneficial interest forms, and the signed purchase and sale agreement or lease agreement or agreement related to that real property interest. So these are public records. And obviously they're public records to promote transparency and accountability in government. And that accountability goes to ensuring that it was an open, fair, and competitive process in accordance with Section 16 of Chapter 30B. So the advertising requirements were met, and then the goalposts with regard to the evaluative criteria were in the same place for everyone, or with regard to price, if it goes to the best price received, highest if you're disposing of that property as a local jurisdiction, or lowest if you're acquiring. Now let's look at some of the exceptions to the rules. Now, emergencies are always exceptions. They are written, this is in the statute. So emergencies are contemplated in the statute. You are not outside of the statute. It is not the same thing as an exemption, which means you are operating outside of Chapter 30B. So again, it's an exception, not an exemption. And what the statute says is that you may shorten the advertising period or waive it completely if that's necessary. Well, what makes it necessary? If the time required to advertise would endanger the health or safety of people or their property. Their property includes the public property because that is an asset of the public that we are stewards of. And it's subject to all other Chapter 30B requirements. So that's any recording requirements, any other kinds of notice requirements like the notice in the central register, if it's disposed of for less than fair market value. So an example of an emergency, and this happened during COVID, our office actually received a fair amount of calls with regard to the acquisition of real property. A governmental body may temporarily need housing during a medical emergency. COVID was absolutely a medical emergency. There was, the potential harm to individuals if that wasn't managed in a manner that was consistent with the safety concerns enunciated by the government. So we have some COVID FAQs. They were listed in our OAG bulletin. They are also on our website. I want to alert you to different resources that are available to you from our office, whether it be we have classes with regard to compliance with the public procurement laws in Massachusetts, including Chapter 30B related to the supplies and services, as well as construction laws. If you're piercing the wall or piercing a ground, you are in a construction zone. And if you are a public entity, public procurement laws related to construction apply to you. We have classes related to compliance. We also have a separate class related to real property transactions and compliance with Chapter 30B. So I'm just giving you some of the highlights today about Section 16 of Chapter 30B. Now, the law is not necessarily intuitive, and that's why we provide these classes as a way of preventing fraud, waste, and abuse in government. Emergency sort of is an area that you have to be careful in. An emergency is not sort of deferred maintenance. It has to be a genuine emergency. You may not invoke the Chapter 30B provisions if you had a reason to know in advance that a tenant will be maybe vacating a facility and you failed to advertise promptly to uncover other interested parties that might be interested in leasing that property. So this is just an example as it relates to real property transactions. All other Chapter 30B requirements apply in the context of an emergency. If you are invoking the emergency provision within Section 16 of Chapter 30B, you publish a notice in the Central Register at the earliest opportunity stating the reason for declaring the emergency. Now, under COVID, there were lots of publications in the Central Register as well as the Goods and Services Bulletin by local jurisdictions with regard to emergency procurements, whether it be land transactions, all land transactions and construction is published in the Central Register, and Goods and Services are published in the Goods and Services Bulletin. Both publications are overseen by the Secretary of State's office. And if you're operating under an emergency and you are acquiring or disposing of land, that's the Central Register, and it's the Goods and Services Bulletin if you are purchasing supplies and services in the context of an emergency. The reasons for the emergency must be stated in the Central Register, again, at the earliest opportunity. We hope that people are doing it within 30 days, but when you're managing an emergency, that can be difficult to do. So the statute requires at the earliest opportunity. Now, with regard to the disclosure of beneficial interest form, that again is a Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance form. We give you the website to acquire it. It actually comes in through a different statute, which is Chapter 7C, section 38. So it's not enunciated exclusively in section 16 of chapter 30B, but we wanted to draw your attention to it. It is required. And so the teeth in a civil statute typically is that the transaction is not valid if the statute isn't complied with. And an invalid contract can't be enforced by the courts. And so with regard to chapter 30B, no payment can be made on invalid contracts, or the lease or the renewal or the extension is not valid. It can't be affected. So it can't be used by the party that benefited from it unless the disclosure of beneficial interest form is filed. So that's the teeth in the statute for land use. With regard to sort of an exception to the rule, there are unique acquisitions under section 16 of chapter 30B. In chapter 30B, generally in other sections, this is sort of equivalent to, in my mind, what a sole source procurement is. So that's included within the statute, but it's an exception to the standard rule. So that's how all of our statutes are written here in Massachusetts. The federal statutes are similarly written. So with regard to unique acquisitions, chapter 30B does not require you to solicit proposals to acquire that property. It has to be so unique. It's sort of like a sole source, right? If you determine that you need a particular piece of property because of its unique qualities or locations, you can do that under unique acquisitions. That's not the same thing as identifying a property that you would like. That's more than $35,000. You're still required to advertise because you might uncover certain opportunities. We've seen unique acquisitions appropriately applied in the context of perhaps something like a firehouse that's expanding its footprint and the abutting property is available. That would be a unique acquisition if the firehouse needs that additional property to expand the bay of its existing structure, perhaps. That would be appropriate as a unique acquisition. It's not to be abused, though, and it should not be used to acquire property simply because you're not aware of any other property that will meet your requirements. That's the purpose of the advertising piece. That's the purpose of notice, to ensure that all qualified parties are aware of this need from your local jurisdiction. Now, in the statute, there are recording requirements. So from a legal perspective, how do you generate evidence? You generate it from documentation or records, and records are very broad. They could be text messages, they could be audio recordings, or interviews, oral statements from individuals or witnesses, right? Those are different forms of evidence. A recording requirement needs to be followed in order for the transaction to be valid, so it does matter. Some people feel like, oh my gosh, it's red tape. Well, that actually is just designed to ensure that the statute is followed and that there's transparency and accountability as it relates to governmental action. So you must publish notice of your unique acquisition and that it's the only property that will meet your needs in the central register at least 30 days before executing that binding agreement to acquire the property. That binding agreement could be a lease agreement, an easement, or the sale of the property. Now that notice, that record, must include the basis for determining the uniqueness of the property. If you're familiar with chapter 30B, you know this sounds very much like a sole source. So the names and the parties with beneficial interest in the property must be listed if there are those parties. The location and the size of the property and the purchase price or rental terms generally. And again, you're complying with chapter 7C still. That doesn't go away. That is still part of this transaction. So you must fill out that form if there are beneficial interests as mentioned and included. So let's look at just some other requirements. There are other state statutes that regulate real property transactions, which might take you outside of chapter 30B. So by way of example, the Last Mile Project in laying and developing land connections for the implementation of internet That when that was promulgated by Governor Baker, they were taken outside of Chapter 30B. They are oftentimes contiguous properties for the laying of fiber optic cable related to ensuring that all of Massachusetts, every city and town, local jurisdiction, everywhere in Massachusetts, you could access the internet. Remember, two, that local rules must be taken into consideration. And that means if your local government wants to do more than just advertise in the local newspaper or the Central Register, you can. And those might be your local rules. You might be required to advertise by placing a notice on your website, perhaps. You can always do more to generate interest and competition. You can't do less. So Chapter 30B covers all of Massachusetts, but local jurisdictions might have their own rules to do more that are consistent and in harmony with the Uniform Procurement Act. And because it's land use and it's land transactions, it runs deeper. You want to consult local counsel, make sure all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. Land transactions, once they are filed, they're filed with your registry of deeds, and some lease agreements by public entities, I think schools, if they meet a certain period of time, are required to be filed with the registry of deeds. They're difficult to unwind once it's filed. You can, it's possible, but it's difficult to unwind. You want to get ahead of it. Always consult your local counsel. Land rights, land transactions, and the ability to actually own land is very much a part of sort of American jurisprudence and our democracy. So that is all I have with real property transactions in Chapter 30B. Does anybody have any questions?
So far, the only question that I see is if we can get a copy of the presentation and the slide deck.
Absolutely. Jennifer, I don't know if I have a PDF. I could email it to you. I tried to drop it into the chat, but it didn't
Okay.
have
No
that
problem.
option.
Yeah, why don't you send it over, because we have a central location for our CCAPPO meeting agendas, minutes, and I can just kind of throw it in there for anyone that needs it. So we can do that.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. I just, if this presentation has sort of whetted your appetite for more information on real property, please feel free to sign up for a class that we offer. It's an asynchronous class. And it goes a little bit deeper into real property transactions and the different sort of permutations on the law and different types of real property transactions. So we have that available to you. Again, this was just an overview, and thank you for inviting me. It's a delight to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. No, a lot of great information. I think that was a great presentation, nice high level, kind of gives everybody an overview of real property and all the different things to keep in mind when doing our procurement. So I think it was great. I'll do another call for questions. Anyone? No? If not, I'll share Maya's information when I send out the newsletter. And if something comes to mind, you can always reach out to her directly. All right.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Maya. I
Jennifer.
really appreciate it. Yeah.
My
Awesome.
pleasure. I'm going to email you those slides and I'm going to bounce off now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. All righty. All right, so it's 11 o'clock. Luckily, I think I will have you probably out of here a little sooner than I had allotted for our meeting today, so that's good. What I'm gonna do is I wanted to quickly just have a really short presentation on the trades contracts, just to kind of go over the really high level overview of the trades. It's a presentation that I've done previously. There is a new added law decision, I guess, or AG decision that everyone should be aware of. So I wanted to kind of give everybody an update on that. We did also finish for the county the trades bid. It's on a constant rolling basis. It does expire every 3 years. So I do have quite a few contractors that were knocked off of the trades contract this year because they did not reapply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my hardest to find additional time to be able to put that out to bid to see if maybe they just really didn't understand my constant bombardment of sending them emails that they were going to be knocked off the contract if they didn't reapply. So I'll give it another effort. Hopefully, you know, maybe it was just a timing issue and they just didn't have time to submit their paperwork. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull up the training. Trades. Okay. Okay. And if you have any questions while I'm going through this, it's pretty short. Just gives you a high-level overview of the trades contract and where to find the resources if you need it. Okay. Okay. Okay, so as most of you know, back in 2016, we had the Municipal Modernization Act, which basically increased the public building construction and formal bidding thresholds to 50,000. The DCAM certification thresholds increased to 150,000 and filed subbids to 25,000. It also permitted the use of blanket contracts for small maintenance and repair services to facilitate the streamlining procurement of these smaller tasks while retaining competitive pricing. So these are the various trade categories that we have currently offering through the county contract. Same as previously done. So for projects that are estimated to cost less than 10,000, you are to use sound business practice. Additional quotes are encouraged but not required unless, so this is something that has recently changed, again, because of a recent decision from the Attorney General's office for a bid protest that came before them. And unless the total between the labor and materials exceeds 10,000, then quotes are required. So if you have a project and the labor is under 10,000, then you are able to use sound business practice. If the materials now brings you over that threshold, you have to use multiple quotes. So it was my interpretation, it was actually the state's OSD's interpretation, and I think every person that I spoke to that does procurement across the state had the same interpretation, that if labor was under 10,000, regardless of the materials, it was sound business practice. So apparently there is an exception to the rule. So just something to keep in mind. It is a bit of a shift, but if it is under 10,000 for labor, and if the materials brings you over 10,000, then you do have to seek quotes, just as you do for anything with labor between 10,000 and 50,000. Just to get a little bit more confusing on everyone. So towns should use a written scope of work to solicit quotes from the county blanket contract vendors first. This is going to encourage, even though you don't need quotes under 10,000, if the full project is under 10,000, if you solicit from our vendors, it does encourage them to start bidding on our projects. And then, you know, we don't hear the constant complaints. Well, we never get any phone calls from any of the towns. It doesn't seem like they really need us and whatnot. So I always say, even if you don't have to solicit quotes, try our county vendors first. Jay, you have a question?
Thanks, Jen. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I
No,
feel like
no,
it's a good
please.
opportunity to ask.
Yeah.
Yep. What if the town's providing the materials for the project and they're
If
just
the-
soliciting labor?
If you're just soliciting labor, then that's all you're looking at. So
Okay.
even, yeah, if you're getting the labor and the materials from the contractor, then that's when you have to incorporate the whole project cost.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so quotes should be in a written format with the total cost of labor and the total cost of materials separate. Prevailing wages apply in most, if not all instances. There's like one or two trades that it might not, depending on the type of services. But if you have any questions, of course, you can always talk to the Department of Labor and Standards if needed. Projects between 10,000 and 50,000. So this is labor only. Towns, again, should use a written scope of work statement to solicit quotes from no fewer than 3 contracted vendors and obtain a minimum of 2 quotes. You can use state contract to supplement, and contractors who do not respond promptly to the request for quotes may be removed from the contract at the discretion of the county. So it is very important that we are soliciting 3 quotes. This is where it's kind of different from 30B. 30B, you just solicit 3 quotes. If you only get 1 back, you only get 1 back. For the trades, you do have to obtain 2 quotes in hand. And a no bid is not, that does not count towards the 2 quotes that you need to obtain. So you need $2 figures in front of you. You may use the state contract to supplement. So if you contacted all of our, electricians, for example, on our county trades, and you only have 1 quote in hand and you need another one, contact any of the state vendors on their TRD contracts for that particular trade, of course. So with that, it is very important, and contractors are to be aware that they should be responding because, again, the response is going to be important in the towns scheduling their projects and getting them done in a timely fashion. So payment bonds in the amount of 50% will be required for projects. So now we're looking at the labor and the materials. If we're getting the materials from the contractor, we're looking at that together. Over 25,000 and must be submitted within 10 days of the award notification. So once you have either an award from your town or a notice to proceed, whatever your internal procedures are, they do have to submit a payment bond directly to the town. So, sorry about that. Okay, and if the minimum requirement is not met, then it must go out to bid. So if you've contacted all of our contractors, if you've contacted, the ones from the state, it is pretty rare, but it does happen, especially trades that are maybe a little bit more specialized. If you don't get that minimum requirement of obtaining 2, then you will have to go out to bid. Okay, municipal and contractor responsibilities. So I did update the user guide. One thing that we did include, we now kind of copied the state a little bit, where we asked our contractors to provide a markup rate. So a markup over labor, a markup over materials. That's only for the vendors that are on contract starting this year. So we do have a couple of contractors from previous county contracts for the trades that didn't provide that information when we first bid them. As we get them, next year we'll have a whole brand new group that'll be up for reapplying for the bid and to be on the trades contract. So they will have to submit those figures at that time when we have a new contract for them. So we did update the user guide, and especially to include that new exception to the $10,000 rule. So this is the link to the tradesperson's directory. I mean, we'll take a quick look at the website just so you can see how it's changed a little bit. I wanted to make it a little bit more user-friendly, and so what I did was I actually, just to make it, easier for everyone, I kind of copied the state a little bit, where I have an Excel spreadsheet with, the contract information, the contact information, the markup, if there is one, hourly rates for business hours, non-business hours, etc. So it's very similar to that. So for the start of the project, once a vendor is notified that they have been awarded through the quoting process, a purchase order and contract will be generated soon thereafter. That's all, dependent on what your town requires. I know at the county level, we just require scope of services and a purchase order to be attached. We don't require a scope of services for each and every project. But you may have different internal procedures that you must adhere to, so it may vary. Contractors should receive a PO from the town prior to performing any and all work, including additional repairs and services that are not part of the initial service call. Failure to receive prior approval may constitute unauthorized repair of service, and contractors will not be compensated for such services. I really, just as a procurement professional, I really like to push that a PO be in place prior to any service beginning. So I always like to let the contractors know that as well, that they really should have a PO in hand or a PO number. In addition, contractors will be held accountable for any unauthorized services and responsible for compensating the town if any damage occurs. Okay, so things to remember: always provide a contractor with a written scope of work when obtaining quotes. Prevailing wage will almost always apply regardless of dollar amount, so something to keep in mind. Projects over 10,000 must solicit 3 quotes, obtain 2, unless the total project is over 10. I have to keep on reminding even myself of that one. A no bid is not permitted towards this requirement of obtaining 2. And no work shall commence without a purchase order number or a purchase order in hand. And when in doubt, I always tell my folks to just ask procurement. Okay, questions and contact info. So I think at this time I'm going to shoot over to the website. I'm going to hope that it still is appearing. If not, hold on. I'll just refresh and just make sure that you can see it. Okay. So as of right now, I do have my web team kind of working on putting together a section here with all of the contracts and the bid sheets that we used to have before with all of the contact info and whatnot. Currently, it resides, unfortunately, in the CCAPPO site where we have kind of like a shared folder. So I will be getting a web extension, but essentially you're going to be seeing this. So countywide contracts, trades, and then each one, depending on the contract number, will be here. But my intent is to have this web piece in the trades page. So let me just quickly shoot back over to that so you can see that. Okay. So essentially there'll be a web piece here where you'll see that folder with each one of those contracts just to make it easy should you need to pull it up, because otherwise all the information that you really need is going to be in one of these 2. So we did update the user guide. Like I mentioned, the contractors all have a copy of this, and it's always available on the website in case it gets revised. Hopefully I don't have to revise it for some time. But it does have all of the information here, what the municipality responsibilities are and what the contractor responsibilities are. Interestingly enough, I actually had the agent's office review this prior to going out for a rebid again on the trades this year. So Debbie Anderson from the from the Attorney General's office did review it and kind of gave me her blessing on that. So and helped me actually revise a couple of things that were unclear. So that was good. And then again, so we have the tradesperson's directory. It opens up to an Excel spreadsheet, very similar to the state. Hopefully this will pop up as well. If you can't see that, just let me know quickly. But it does pop up with the contract number, the category. You can sort it, filter it however you need to. It has the hourly wages, the markups. We did sign the new contracts for a 3-year contract, so there may be, a slight change and increase in each year, etc. So you'll be able to kind of refer to this as they're submitting their quotes. If something seems a little high or, just doesn't seem to be matching up to previous invoices or whatnot, you can always come here and check to see what it is. So as far as I know, they can't exceed these percentages, but I'm almost certain, and I can certainly get an answer. I think it can be less than this. I remember at some point hearing that, but I can always double check. We have the estimator contact information, what areas of the Cape they service, and when it was awarded, and I kind of put the contract information towards the end so that way it didn't, clog up kind of the important information that everybody's going to want at the beginning. So that is all kind of at the end, but I think the meat of it is kind of at the beginning for everyone. So like I said, contract category, the markups, and the estimator contact information. Okay. So that's it on the trades. I am going to be sending out, I think I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that there were quite a few that, just completely disregarded my many warnings. So I am going to hopefully get this back out to bid. I will give them another chance at, partaking in this. So that way they can get back on, because we did lose quite a few. We gained a couple of new ones, which was great. Check their references. So raving reviews across the state on some of the new contractors that we have. So that was good. Any questions on the trades before I move on to the next agenda item? And thanks, Donna. That's always how I end even my internal presentations. I always say, well, when in doubt, just ask procurement. All right. No. Okay, so some of the other county bids. So we have our spring bids that are coming up. The heating, oil, gasoline, and diesel are currently out for bid. Bids are due next month. Actually, I should have the date of that in front of me, shouldn't I? Yes, bids are going to be due on April 11th at 11 o'clock, and similar to every other year, if our municipalities are going to want to lock in, if we have a really exceptional price that day, hopefully better than last year. If municipalities want to lock in, they'll have to do so by 2 o'clock that day. Anyone who's on that list, I'm sure, is heard all of that information from me already, but just in case, I always like to reiterate it. And then we do have a pre-bid meeting on April 5th for the fuel and gasoline and diesel, just to kind of go over, expectations with vendors and clarify anything that they may have questions on with the bid. And that's going to be through Microsoft Teams. If you need to receive an invite to that, or if you want more bid information, we do have that on the county bid page, which is barnstablecounty.bonfirehub.com. Paper, copy paper, purchasing that in bulk, and water chemicals. I'm going to be sending out information to the towns. I'm hoping early April, which is next week. So I'll be sending that out to the towns and to the contact people that I've contacted in previous years to kind of get those bids rolling and hopefully have that bid out in early May. And then I think that's it for the county bid update. Everything else from winter and fall, from fall and winter, have been completed. Everything's on the website with pricing and contracts all uploaded. Let's see. Any questions on county bids before I move to our final piece? Nope. Okay, so final is, I just have a announcement. I'm going to put this in the newsletter as well, so that way if there's anyone within your jurisdiction that you think might benefit from this, but the town of Dennis is going to be, or actually I should say the Dennis Police Department in the town of Dennis is going to be having a full day training with the Office of the Inspector General, and Neil Cohen. It's going to be in person. So Neil Cohen reached out to me, and I had, talked to him and said that maybe, bringing some training opportunities out into the Cape would be, beneficial. We've been having these kind of, small ones with CCAPPO, which is great. But they're going to be offering a full day training, and he does have 20 spots available. So it's going to be kind of a first come, first serve, and the contact will be Neil Cohen. So I'm going to give his email address. So if you're interested, or if you want to share that information with someone that within, like I said, within your jurisdiction that might be interested, it is limited to 20 spots, and it's first come, first serve. So whoever contacts him and said that you heard it here with CCAPPO, he can get you registered and give you all the information. But that training is going to be on April 26th. And like I said, it's a full day training. So I thought that was a great opportunity and wanted to share that information. I can put into the chat his email address. It's for anyone listening, it's neil.cohen@mass.gov. So I'll go ahead and type that in for everyone. So like I said, it's limited to 20. So if you're interested, jump on it. As far as I know, I don't think there's any charge. I think it's free of cost. Yeah, there is no fee for the training. So that's, a good opportunity if it's free. I know us procurement folks like that. And that's all I have for today. Any questions, concerns? No? All right. Well, I'm going to get you out of here early. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Anyone awake?
So moved, Griffin Ryder.
Thanks, Griffin. Hope all is well. Second. Anyone?
Second, Jay Norton.
Thanks, Jay. All right. All those in favor. Have a wonderful day, folks. Stay dry. And I will see you in May.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jen.
No problem.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Bye-bye.